The buzzing wouldn't stop. It was a vicious, persistent sound that cut straight through the quiet afternoon. I was up to my elbows in paint, a roller in one hand, trying to finally finish the hallway accent wall I'd started 3 weeks ago. The plastic drop cloth crinkled under my feet as I moved. From the living room, I could hear Leo making vroom noises with his collection of monster trucks. Mark had left his phone on the kitchen island. Again. He was out back in the shed, probably sharpening the chain on his biggest saw. The buzzing continued, vibrating against the granite countertop with an insistence that felt personal. "Daddy's phone is yelling," Leo called out, his voice high and clear over the imaginary roar of his trucks. "I know. Honey. Mommy's getting it." I wiped my hands on a paint-splattered rag, leaving a streak of dusty sage across my jeans, and snatched the phone. The screen flashed unknown caller. That wasn't strange. Mark ran his own tree care business, calls from new clients. Panicked homeowners with a limb hanging over their roof came in at all hours. They often blocked their numbers. I swiped the green icon. "Hello." Mark's phone. Silence. A heavy, static-filled pause. Then, a woman's voice, so soft it was almost a breath, drifted into my ear. "You left your blue flannel shirt here again." My blood didn't just run cold, it evaporated. I stopped breathing. The words weren't casual. They were intimate, familiar, laced with a private smile I could hear. It was the voice of someone comfortable, someone sharing a small, domestic secret. I stood frozen in my kitchen, the paint roller still clutched in my other hand, dripping onto the drop cloth. My mind flashed to the worn blue flannel shirt Mark loved, the one with the soft, frayed collar. He wore it when he was relaxing, not when he was working. Not when he was covered in sawdust and sap. The woman on the phone didn't wait for a response. She giggled. A light, airy sound that made my stomach clench into a tiny, painful knot. "I was going to wash it for you, but it just smells." "Well, it smells like you. I miss you already." And then, the final blow, delivered with that same sleepy intimacy. "I love you so much." The word struck me like a physical impact, knocking the air from my lungs. I couldn't move. I couldn't think. My thumb found the red end call button and pressed it with so much force I felt the screen bend. The kitchen was instantly, dreadfully silent, save for the vroom and crash of Leo's trucks. I stared at the black screen of the phone as if it were a venomous snake. My legs went weak, and I gripped the edge of the counter to keep from sliding to the floor. A flannel shirt. His flannel shirt. That meant he had been somewhere, taken it off, and forgotten it. Not a work site. Not the cab of his truck. A place where you get comfortable. A place where someone offers to do your laundry. A place where someone whispers they love you. My mind raced, desperately trying to find an explanation that wasn't this. Mark was an arborist. He came home smelling of pine and dirt, his clothes stained with resin. He always stripped down in the mudroom before coming inside, dumping his work gear straight into the heavy-duty washer. His casual clothes, his flannel shirts, they stayed in our closet. They went into our laundry basket. So whose laundry basket was his blue flannel shirt in now? I looked out the kitchen window, past the patio furniture, to the shed at the back of the yard. I could hear the high-pitched whine of the sharpener, a familiar sound that usually meant Mark was content, lost in his work. Today, it sounded like a warning. He was out there, completely oblivious that his entire world had just cracked open. 10 years. We'd been together for 10 years. Married for 7. Leo was 5. This woman. That voice. My head snapped up. The voice. I replayed it. The soft giggle. The, I love you. It was faint, buried under layers of memory. But it was there. It wasn't the voice of a stranger. It was a voice I had heard before, somewhere in our life, which meant this wasn't some random woman he'd met. This was someone who knew us. This was someone I knew. I spent the next 40 minutes pacing the hallway, the smell of fresh paint making me sick. Every time the sharpener in the shed went quiet, my heart leaped into my throat. Leo, sensing the shift in the air, abandoned his trucks and came to wrap his arms around my leg. "Mommy, your face is sad." I forced a smile that felt like breaking glass. "I'm just tired. Baby." "Mommy's okay." But I wasn't. I was disintegrating. When Mark finally came through the back door, wiping grease from his hands with a red rag, I was sitting at the kitchen table, pretending to flip through a seed catalog. My hands were shaking so violently I had to hide them in my lap. "Hey," he said, kissing the top of my head. It was the same kiss he gave me every day, a casual gesture of affection that suddenly felt like a lie. That big chain was duller than I thought. Took forever. I watched him move to the sink, watched the familiar motion as he scrubbed his hands, the black grease disappearing under the soap. Was he washing off dirt from his tools? Or was he washing off her? "Your phone rang," I said. My voice was thin. "Reedy." He glanced over his shoulder, his face open, smiling. "Oh yeah, anyone important." I answered it. He turned off the water, reaching for the hand towel. The smile faltered. A shadow, quick as a hummingbird's wing, passed over his features. It wasn't just surprise. It was alarm. "You did what?" "What did they want?" His voice was suddenly cautious. He wasn't looking at me, focusing instead on drying each finger meticulously. It was a woman. I stood up. The catalog slid from my lap and hit the floor with a soft thud. "She said you left your blue flannel shirt at her place." The color drained from Mark's face. It wasn't the red-faced flush of embarrassment. It was the stark, white pallor of pure panic. He looked, for one terrifying second, like a cornered animal. "Helada." "Listen." She giggled. "Mark." My voice was cracking now, the hysteria bubbling up. "She said she missed you already." She said she loved you." Mark ran his hands through his hair, a gesture I knew meant he was overwhelmed. But this wasn't stressed about a difficult tree removal overwhelmed. This was, my life is ending, overwhelmed. His eyes darted to the hallway, toward Leo's room. "It's not what you think," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "Then what is it?" I stepped toward him. my body vibrating with a fear so profound it felt like illness. Because what I think is that my husband of 7 years, is having an affair with someone I know. No, he shook his head. Too hard. No. Elara, I swear to you, it is not like that. It's complicated. Complicated, I let out a harsh laugh that sounded more like a sob. What part is complicated? Mark, you're either cheating on me or you're not. He looked at me, his eyes filled with a desperate, agonizing pain that I didn't understand. He looked like he wanted to explain, like the words were right on his tongue. He opened his mouth, and then his gaze flickered past me, to the hallway, where Leo had just peeked his head out, his eyes wide with confusion. Mark's face shuddered. The vulnerability vanished, replaced by a cold, hard wall. The lie solidified. We can't talk about this now, he said, his voice flat. Yes. We are. The word came out sharp, and I saw Leo flinch and disappear. I have been going insane for an hour. Mark. Who is she? He wouldn't meet my eyes. His hands were shaking now, too. I can't tell you. You can't tell me. My voice rose to a shriek, and I forced it back down, my throat burning. You can't tell your wife who you're sleeping with. I'm not sleeping with anyone, he roared. And the desperation was back, raw and terrifying. God, Elara, I would never do that to you. You have to believe me. Then explain the flannel shirt. Explain, I love you. I can't. Why not? He looked utterly lost. Broken. Because you wouldn't understand. You'd hate me. That was the deepest cut of all. Try me, I whispered. Mark stared at me, his chest heaving. An internal battle was raging behind his eyes. Then, defeated, he grabbed his phone from the island. I have to fix this. His voice was choked. He started dialing as he walked toward the back door. Mark, don't you walk away from me. Don't you dare. But he was already outside, the glass door sliding shut between us. I watched through the window as he paced the deck, his back to me, his voice urgent and low as he spoke into the phone. Talking to her. Calling the woman with the familiar giggle who had his shirt and his love. Mark slept on the couch. Or at least, he tried to. I heard him shift and sigh every 20 minutes, the old springs groaning under his weight. I lay in our bed, the king-sized mattress feeling like a desolate, empty field. I stared at the ceiling, the shadows from the street lamp outside painting shifting. Ghostly patterns. I replayed the phone call until the words lost all meaning. I love you so much. I replayed Mark's face. The stark white panic. The desperation in his voice. I'm not sleeping with anyone. He was a terrible liar. Always had been. But he was also fiercely protective. Intensely private about his past. He'd told me his parents died in a car crash when he was 20, leaving him with nothing. He'd never mentioned any other family. Now, I saw that privacy not as a wound he was protecting, but as a wall he had built to hide things from me. The trust that had been the foundation of our life was crumbling. When my alarm finally went off at 6:00 a.m., the other side of the bed was still empty. I got up, my body aching as if I'd been in a fight. Downstairs, the house was quiet. The couch was empty, the blanket folded neatly. He was gone. He'd left for work before Leo and I even woke up, something he only did when he was on a massive, time-sensitive job. A note was on the kitchen counter, next to the coffee pot he'd prepared. Ilara, we need to talk tonight. I promise I'll explain. I love you. The I love you felt like an insult. A cheap punctuation mark at the end of a devastating lie. The not knowing was a physical sickness. It was a parasite, eating me from the inside out. I couldn't wait until tonight. I couldn't sit and pretend to be a normal mother, a normal wife, while my life was imploding. After I dropped Leo off at kindergarten, his cheerful bye, Mommy, a sharp stab in my heart, I drove home with a cold, frantic energy. I was going to find the truth. I had to. I started with his truck. The big, muddy F-250, that was his mobile office. I felt a wave of guilt as my hand closed around the cold metal handle. I had never, in 10 years, violated his privacy like this. But the woman's giggle echoed in my ears, and I pulled the door open. The cab smelled of sawdust, gasoline, and old coffee. I ripped open the glove compartment registration. Insurance. An old granola bar wrapper. A few loose bolts. Nothing. I jammed my hand under the passenger seat, my fingers brushing against fast food receipts and hardened mud. Nothing. I moved to the back, pulling open the heavy toolbox. It was filled with ropes, carabiners, and pruning saws. I felt pathetic, digging through his gear like a jealous teenager. What did I expect to find? A lace-trimmed piece of lingerie tucked between his climbing spikes. I slammed the toolbox shut, my frustration mounting. I was failing. I was finding nothing, which only made me feel crazier, made me doubt my own sanity. Maybe I was the one who was wrong. Maybe Mark was right. And it was all some complicated misunderstanding I was blowing out of proportion. I leaned against the truck, my head throbbing. No. The voice was real. The panic on his face was real. You left your blue flannel shirt. I went back inside, my resolve hardened by the failure at the truck. If the secret wasn't in his truck, it was in his sanctuary, the small, cluttered desk in the corner of our bedroom he called his office. It was where he kept the business checkbook, the files, the important papers. I pulled out the bottom drawer, the one that always stuck. It was filled with manila folders, vehicle maintenance, equipment receipts, taxes, and one labeled personal. My hands were shaking again. I opened it. Inside were our marriage license, Leo's birth certificate, and a stack of bank statements for the business account. An account I had access to but never, ever checked. Mark handled the finances for his company. I handled the household budget. It was a division of labor that had always worked. I pulled out the most recent statement. I scanned the list of transactions. Gas. Equipment Supply Co. Payroll. Standard. Then my eyes locked on a recurring charge. Oakwood Meadows. Wu by Arshameyuan. Ling Ling. I pulled out the statement from the month before. Oakwood Meadows. 520美元. Ling Ling. And the month before that? 520美元. Ling Ling. I spread the statements across the desk. Every single month. On the first, for the past 4 years. An automatic payment of $520. That was over $6. 000 a year. Over $24. 0 inches total. A slow, steady drain on our money that I had never known about. My heart was pounding a deafening rhythm against my ribs. I scrambled for my laptop, my fingers fumbling on the keys as I typed Oakwood Meadows. The website loaded. It wasn't a sleek condo building. It wasn't a vacation rental. The homepage showed a serene, tree-lined campus. A brick building that looked more like a university dorm than a hospital. The slogan at the top read, Compassionate Long-Term Residential Care. My stomach dropped. I clicked, About Us. This wasn't a nursing home for the elderly. Oakwood Meadows specialized in long-term care for adults facing significant mental and developmental challenges. It was a residential facility. A place where people lived. A place for people who couldn't take care of themselves. People who needed round-the-clock supervision, psychiatric support, and structured therapeutic environments. Mark had been paying $520 a month for 4 years to a mental health facility. This wasn't an affair. This was something else. Something bigger, and somehow more terrifying. This was a secret he had kept, not for a few months, but for our entire life together. He was financially responsible for someone he had hidden from me. His wife. A loved one. The word hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Someone he loved enough to lie to me for a decade. Someone he loved enough to spend thousands of dollars on. Money that could have gone to our mortgage. To Leo's college fund. Who was it, and why? Why had he hidden them? The woman on the phone. The familiar voice. The intimate, loving words. My mind couldn't connect the two. Was she the one in this facility? Was Mark in a relationship with a patient? The thought was grotesque. But no more grotesque than the lies he'd already told. I looked at the address on the website. 1400 Willow Creek Road. It was on the other side of the county. Maybe a 30-minute drive. I glanced at the clock. 1030 a.m. Leo wouldn't be out of school for another 5 hours. I grabbed my keys. The bank statements clutched in my hand. I wasn't waiting for tonight. I wasn't waiting for more lies. I was going to Oakwood Meadows. And I was going to get the truth. The 30-minute drive felt like an eternity. I kept changing the radio station, unable to stand the cheerful songs or the droning talk shows. My mind was a whirlwind of horrific possibilities. Was Mark paying blackmail? Was he supporting a child I never knew existed? Was the woman from the phone a patient he'd become involved with? Each new theory made my stomach heave. When I pulled up to 1400 Willow Creek Road, my last shred of hope withered. The website's photos had been skillfully taken, focusing on the rose bushes and the single, modern-looking entrance. The reality was a sprawling, faded brick institution from the 1972nd, surrounded by a high, wrought iron fence. The windows were small, It didn't look like a place of healing. It looked like a place of containment. My palms were sweating so much I had to wipe them on my jeans before I could unbuckle my seatbelt. I sat in the car for a full 5 minutes, watching a few staff members in scrubs take a smoke break near a side door. I clutched the folded bank statements in my hand like a shield. Finally, I forced myself out of the car and walked toward the main entrance. The lobby was aggressively sterile, smelling of industrial disinfectant and old coffee. The furniture was bolted to the floor. Behind a thick pane of security glass sat a receptionist, a woman in her late 50s with tired eyes and a name tag that read Brenda. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice flat. "Bored. I'm here to visit someone," I stammered, my voice sounding small and foreign. "But I'm not sure of the name. My husband. He makes payments here." Brenda's expression immediately hardened. The bored look was gone, replaced by a protective, professional mask. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I can't give out any patient information. HIPAA regulations." "No, you don't understand." My voice was rising, and I fought to control it. I unfolded the bank statement, pressing it against the glass. "Look. 520 yuan. Every month. From this account. Mark Anderson. He's my husband. I just need to know who this is for. I'm his wife. I have a right to know." Brenda barely glanced at the paper. "Ma'am, being his wife doesn't give you access to a patient's protected health information, even if he is the one paying. Unless you are listed as an authorized contact, I can't tell you anything." I was hitting a wall. A cold, bureaucratic wall. Desperation clawed at my throat. "Please," I whispered, the fight draining out of me, replaced by a raw plea. "I think my husband is in trouble. Or something is very wrong. I'm not trying to cause problems. I'm just scared. Please." Brenda stared at me for a long, heavy moment. I saw her eyes soften just a fraction. She saw I wasn't angry anymore, just broken. She sighed, a long, weary sound, and turned to her computer. "What was your husband's name again?" Mark Anderson." She typed. I watched her face. Her eyebrows rose in recognition. Then, her expression shifted entirely, melting into a look of profound, almost unbearable pity. "Oh," she said, so softly I barely heard her. "You're Mark's wife." The way she said it, it was like she knew. Like I was a character in a story she'd heard 100 times. "You know him, Mr. Anderson comes every week," she said, her voice gentle now. "He's been coming for years. Such a good man. So devoted." She paused, then added, "He's his sister's only visitor." The word hit me like a physical blow. Sister, my knees buckled, and I gripped the high counter. That's not possible. His parents are dead. He's an only child. Brenda looked genuinely confused. His parents. No. Honey. His parents are the ones who had her admitted. Mark took over as her legal guardian as soon as he turned 25. He's all she has. I couldn't process the words. Legal guardian. Sister. He'd lied. He hadn't just omitted a detail. He had fabricated his entire past, the foundation of our life, his identity as a man alone in the world. It was all a lie. Who I choked out. What's her name? Clara. Clara Anderson. Can I see her? Brenda hesitated, her eyes darting around the empty lobby. You're not on the visitor list. Mark is the only one. Brenda, please. The tears were coming now, hot and unstoppable. I got a phone call yesterday. From a woman. She said she loved him. She said he left his shirt at her place. I thought he was cheating. But the voice, it sounded familiar. Brenda's face clicked with a sudden, sad understanding. Oh, dear. She looked down the hall, then back at me. Room 214. West Hall. Turn left at the nurse's station. She gets confused. She has good days and bad days. It sounds like yesterday was a bad day. Thank you. And ma'am, I turned back. Go easy on him. That man's been carrying the world on his shoulders since before you ever met him. I walked down the hallway in a daze. It was dimmer here, the air thicker. I could hear a television blaring a game show from one room. A low, rhythmic moaning from another. My heart was a cold stone in my chest. The anger I'd felt, the jealous rage, it had all evaporated, replaced by a hollow, terrifying void. I found room 214. Her name was on a small plastic placard C. Anderson. I raised a trembling hand and knocked. Come in. The voice was light, cheerful. I pushed the door open. The room was small, painted a pale, sickly green. There was a single bed, a metal dresser, and one chair by a window that overlooked a gravel courtyard. Sitting in the chair, brushing a doll's hair, was a woman. She looked to be in her late 30s, with long, dark, matted hair and a thin frame. She turned as I entered, and my breath caught. She had Mark's eyes, the exact same shape, the same deep, soulful brown. It was like looking at a fractured reflection of my husband. She smiled, a wide, luminous smile that was both beautiful and utterly vacant. Mark, she said, her voice filled with delight. You're back. I knew you'd come back for it. You left your blue flannel shirt again. It was her. The voice from the phone. The giggle. The intimacy. It was all here, in this room that smelled of stale air and medication. I swallowed, my throat raw. I'm not Mark, I said, my voice barely a whisper. I took a step into the room, leaving the door open behind me. My name is Alara. I'm Mark's wife. Clara's smile vanished. Her face cycled through a dozen emotions in a second: confusion, then recognition, then a dark, sudden fear. Wife, she repeated, the word sounding like poison. She clutched the doll to her chest. No. He doesn't have a wife. He's my brother. He's my Mark. He promised he'd always take care of me. He has, I said, taking another gentle step. He does take care of you, Clara. He got married, she whispered, the reality of it seeming to land. Tears welled in her eyes. He lied to me. He said it was just us. He promised. When did you talk to him last? I asked, sinking into the corner, trying to make myself as small as possible. Yesterday. She sniffled, wiping her nose on the sleeve of her hospital gown. I called him. I was having a bad day. The Ezra lap. The voices were loud. And I missed him. I have his shirt. She pointed to the bed. And there it was. The blue flannel shirt, balled up on her pillow. I told him I loved him. But he sounded strange. He hung up. And now you're here. You're the wife. Clara, I said, my heart aching with a pain I didn't even know how to name. Your parents. Mark told me they were gone. Her face darkened. They're gone to me. They put me here. They said I was broken. They said I ruined everything. Her voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. They told Mark to forget me. To have a normal life. But he didn't. He chose me. They told him if he chose me, he was as dead as I was. The pieces slammed into place. Sharp and brutal. Mark's dead parents. His secrecy. The panic. The monthly payments. The lie wasn't about an affair. The lie was his entire life. He had been disowned for refusing to abandon his sister. A sister he had hidden from me. His wife. For 10 years. He had carried this all. Paid for it all. Visited her every week. All while pretending to be the last. Lonely survivor of a family tragedy. The man I married didn't just have a secret. He was a secret. I don't remember the drive home. I must have stopped at stop signs and used my turn signal. I must have navigated the streets back to our house. But I have no memory of it. I felt completely hollowed out. A shell of the person I was that morning. The white-hot rage of infidelity had been replaced by this vast, cold, echoing grief. It was grief for the man I thought I'd married. And a deeper, more painful grief for the man I'd actually married. A man who had been suffering in silence for our entire relationship. He had chosen his sister over his parents. Over a normal life. He had shouldered this burden alone. Built a wall of lies around it. And then invited me to live outside that wall. His truck was in the driveway. He'd come home early. He knew. Brenda must have called him. I walked in through the front door. He was sitting at the kitchen table. The same spot where I'd sat that morning. His hands clasped so tightly, his knuckles were white. He looked up when I entered. His face was ravaged. He looked 10 years older, his eyes red-rimmed and exhausted. Defeated. We stared at each other for a long moment. The silence in the house was heavy, broken only by the hum of the refrigerator. I went to Oakwood Meadows. I said. My voice was flat, devoid of all emotion. His shoulders sagged, and he let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for a decade. He buried his face in his hands, his whole body beginning to shake with silent sobs. "Emet Clara," I said, walking closer, my bag sliding from my shoulder and hitting the floor. "Elara," he choked out from behind his hands. I'm so sorry. She told me, I said, sitting down across from him. She told me about your parents. How they disowned you. He looked up, his face wet with tears. I was so ashamed, he whispered, the words raw and broken. Not of her. Never of her. She's Clara. But of them, of what they did, they just threw her away. Like she was garbage. Because she got sick. Because she wasn't perfect. Why? Mark, my voice was quiet, but the question was immense. Why didn't you tell me 10 years? When we first met, he said, his eyes fixed on the table, on a memory I couldn't see. You were so happy. You talked about your family, your parents, your Sunday dinners. It was all so normal. So good. How was I supposed to drop this on you? Hi. My name is Mark. My parents disowned me. And my sister lives in a long-term psychiatric facility because she hears voices and sometimes thinks I'm her boyfriend. The pain in his voice was a physical thing. I wanted to. He insisted, looking at me, his eyes pleading. God. Elara. So many times. But the longer I waited, the bigger the lie got. It became this monster. And then we had Leo. And I was so terrified. Terrified, you'd think. You'd think it was in our blood. That you'd look at Leo and worry that he would get sick. Too. That you'd leave me. That you couldn't handle being tied to something so broken. So you carried it alone. I said. It wasn't a question. She's my responsibility. He said, his voice gaining a small, hard edge of the old, protective mark. I couldn't abandon her. I wouldn't. After what they did, I was all she had. The phone call, I said, the memory still stinging. She has episodes, he explained, wiping his face. The medication. It helps, but it doesn't cure her. Some days, she's perfectly lucid. Other days, she gets lost. She gets confused about who I am. Yesterday, she was just having a bad day. She was scared. She needed me. And in her head, I wasn't her brother. I thought of Clara, alone in that pale green room, clutching a doll and a flannel shirt. I thought of Mark, coming home from his grueling job, then driving 30 minutes to visit her, sitting in that room, being her only link to the outside world, and then driving home to me, pretending his life was simple, pretending his heart wasn't split in two. He had been living two entirely separate lives, all to protect me from a truth he thought I couldn't bear. "I'm not going anywhere," I said. He looked up, his expression a mask of confusion and disbelief. "What?" "I am angry. Mark. I am so angry that you didn't trust me. That you thought so little of me that you built this. This fortress of lies. That hurts more than anything." I took a deep breath. The cold, a hollow feeling inside me, starting to fill with something new. Something warm and painful. "But I'm not leaving. She's your sister. She's sick. And she needs you." I reached across the table and, for the first time, took his hand. "That doesn't make her your secret. It makes her our family." He collapsed onto the table, his head on our clasped hands, and he wept. He wept for his parents, for his sister, for the 10 years of lies, and for the relief of it finally being over. And I sat with him, and I wept too. 3 months later, I was sitting in that same pale green room at Oakwood Meadows, but it felt different. We'd brought in a brighter comforter, some new books, and a digital photo frame that cycled through pictures of our life. Pictures that now included Clara. "He has your nose," Clara said, smiling. She was holding a framed school photo of Leo. She was having a good day. Her hair was brushed, and her eyes were clear. "He has Mark's messy hair," I replied, laughing. "We're bringing him next week. Just for a little while. Dr. Evans thinks it would be good for both of you." Clara's eyes lit up, then dimmed with the familiar anxiety. What if I get confused? What if I scare him? "Then we'll handle it," I said, squeezing her hand. "Together. That's what family does." That evening, Mark and I sat on the back porch. A new ritual for us. A no secrets check-in. Leo was asleep upstairs, his backpack ready for school. A picture he'd drawn for Aunt Clara tucked inside. "I never thought I'd say this," Mark said, taking my hand, his thumb tracing circles on my palm. "But I'm glad you answered that phone call." I looked at him, silhouetted against the fading sunset. "It almost destroyed us." "It didn't, though," he said, his voice thick. "It saved us. That secret." Elara. It was so heavy. It was killing me. And it was poisoning us, even if you didn't know it. You answering that phone. It brought her back into the light. It brought me back. I leaned my head on his shoulder, feeling the solid, steady beat of his heart. The anger was long gone. The betrayal had faded, replaced by a stronger, more resilient bond, forged in the truth. We weren't the perfect, happy couple I'd always thought we were. We were something better. We were real. No more secrets. I whispered. No more secrets. He promised. And I finally, completely, believed him. It's astonishing how a single, hidden truth, even one kept out of love and shame, can be a greater betrayal than the lie we first imagine. We build our lives on what we think we know, but sometimes the real foundation is hidden, waiting for one moment, one phone call, to reveal itself. The truth can be devastating, but it's the only ground solid enough to build a real life on. Thank you for being with us through this emotional journey. If Alara's story, or Mark's, touched your heart, please let us know in the comments. What would you have done? These stories are about the real, complicated parts of life, and we're so grateful to share them with you. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell so you don't miss our next story.